1. Worked myself into very poor health for a small PCB design and manufacturing shop in the early noughties. It was a very small company recently acquired by a startup to combine some very complementary IP. I worked very hard with customers to meet all their supplier needs. About 80% plus of our output went to one very large industry leader, a big customer. This included weekly and monthly calls and reports on manufacturing and field performance and failure rates, engineering change requests, corrective actions, etc. Very boring, very technical, but critically important. Big customer had retained my employer as a small supplier without a formal supplier contract. After a couple of years, their policies changed, and they required my employer to sign a supplier contract. At the time, we just enjoyed getting a new general manager forced on us by the parent startup, and he was a grievous asshole. There was a whole section of the supposed supplier contract dealing with reporting requirements. The GM called me into his office and assigned me the task of writing up why each of the reporting requirements could not be met. I told him, after reading the entire contract, I am and we are already fully in compliance with every single reporting requirement documented. He fell out of his chair and asked how that could be possible. It was possible because big customer supplier manager had provided all their data and reporting needs to me about a year prior, and I established everything needed to support them and keep them happy. I told my GM he's copied on every single report I email out, weekly and monthly, with all the attachments that cover every single thing. In short, nothing extra needed. It's all been good for at least a year, and GM doesn't look at emails from me. I sorta knew that already. We all knew the GM was there to change the business model, from a supplier to a design shop. It was a poorly kept secret. That is, we were going to stop designing, manufacturing, and selling completed specialized product, just design the boards and license the customers to go find their own contract manufacturers. I knew this strategy meant I would eventually be laid off. I just didn't expect it so fast. So, I'm so stressed out, doing so many things. I got a bad internal infection and ended up in the hospital for a week, Sunday to Friday. I've never had it before, didn't know what it was or how serious it was until I passed out at home. Got better, went back to work the next Monday. Got laid off about 10 a.m. that first day back. This was 2009, right at the start of the Great Recession. I was screwed, but didn't show it as I was getting laid off. I just smiled, refused to sign anything until I had 24 hours to review the terms, stood up, shook hands, walked out. Thankfully, I found employment again about a month later. That was amazing, given my career choices and specialities at the time. One day, shortly after starting my new work, I received a call from my old boss. He was asking questions about those reports. I actually felt sorry for him. He'd cried at my layoff, something even I hadn't done. Side note, I so wanted to tell him there's no crying in baseball, but I was in too foul a mood to be humorous at my layoff. I answered his questions fully, but I did not offer anything additional, knowing that he was hopelessly lost. Perhaps it's good to mention here, he was from a completely separate profession than I. He had no clue what I did, just that I kept big customer happy. Sure enough, a week following, my old boss calls me back and says the company wants to rescind my layoff and hire me back. I say, thanks, no thanks. 3 days after that, the GM who laid me off calls me and offers me my job back. I tell him thanks, no thanks. He reminds me that I forfeit unemployment benefits if he files paperwork to the state, telling them that they offered me my job back and I refuse. I tell him thanks, no thanks. I refuse to be threatened or intimidated by him, especially because I had a new job that was covering my ass, albeit at lower pay. Through it all, I stayed professional and polite. I also did not let on that I didn't need unemployment benefits at that time. I can't remember how many days later my former boss called me back, says he's authorized to offer me my job back, bridging my service immediately, reallocating all my unvested stock options at their original vesting schedule, and re-establishing my paid time off hours that were cashed out when I was laid off. It was tempting, because my new job was about a 25% pay cut. But I said thanks, no thanks. My boss asked me again to sign a statement of refusal. I said thanks, no thanks, and hung up. A week later I heard from a colleague the GM was gone. No explanation, just gone. About a month after that, the company was sold by the larger startup to a similar but quite large and well-established company, which was a supplier to big company. The good news was all the employees that weren't senior management were retained, including all my colleagues and my boss. The best revenge is a life well lived. 2. So I had a new neighbor move in below me 2 months ago, and that was around the time I started to notice that my bins were almost always full when I would go to put my rubbish in, which was seriously annoying. Plus he was dumping food waste into my blue recycling bin, and on more than one occasion, this led to me being forced to travel in a car to my parents' house to put my rubbish inside their huge communal bin, because there was never any space in my own bins. Cue extreme frustration on a regular basis. So I did what any self-respecting British person would do, and promptly called up my private landlord to complain about this and ask why they did not have a bin of their own. To which the person on the phone proceeded to explain that a few years back, someone living at the property below me had set fire to both of their bins, and neither they or my landlord had bothered to get them replaced. So when this new tenant moved in, he just found that he had no bins for his rubbish. Did he call the council to request some bins for himself? Did he knock on my door to at least have the courtesy to ask if he can use my bins until he gets some of his own? No. He just decided to use my bins as if they were his own, and he just assumed I would tolerate this. How wrong he was. So after my conversation with the people working at my landlord's office, they proceeded to send out letters to all the properties surrounding mine. Because they apparently couldn't directly accuse my neighbor below without proof it was him doing it, giving everyone a stern warning that they should use their own bins and not others, and that it was frowned upon. A week goes by, and my bin is still being used by the buffoon living below me, so I ring them up again and ask what they're going to do, because the letter hasn't had any effect, and once again I still can't deposit my rubbish in my bin, because it was full of someone else's crap again. They just proceeded to give me the runaround, and long story short, they were all bark and no bite and were not willing to get off their asses and fix the damn problem. So by this point it has been 2 months and I am thoroughly fed up with this, and so I decide to take action. I contact my dad and we have a brainstorm and come up with a plan. You drive to the local B&Q, a hardware store, to buy supplies, and a drive to get his tools and then back to my house to put the plan into action. We decide to cut a hole in the top lid and on the side of the bin on both bins. We put a thick, strong chain through the holes to secure the lid shut, and then bolted the chains together with a thick, strong padlock on both bins. Take that, annoying neighbor! Now he has someone else's problem, and I finally have space for my own rubbish in my own bin. Peace has been restored, and all is right in the world of bins. I told this story to my sister, who laughed and thought what I did was overkill, but I disagree. What do you all think, oh lovely people? Was my reaction a bit overboard, or was it justified? I believe it was a necessary action that had to be taken, and now I can rest assured my bins are safe once more. 3. I was a medic in a light infantry battalion in the US Army in the early 90s. In our infantry battalion, there were 2 sets of medics in headquarters company who all belonged to the same platoon. Most of the squads in the platoon were in the first set and were referred to as line medics. They were constantly lent out to the various companies in the battalion for field exercises and so forth. For all practical purposes, line medics did just about everything the other infantrymen did out in the field. For the most part, this entailed trudging through snow for long distances while lugging our belongings around on our backs in a rucksack and pulling a sled with an Arctic 10-man tent. The light in light infantry alludes to the fact that we traveled light enough to not need a vehicle. In reality, there was nothing light about it. One squad in the medical platoon permanently remained with headquarters, in the field, They were in charge of maintaining medical records, setting up and staffing the battalion aid station in the field, driving the ambulances, and keeping the battalion pharmacy stocked. We had some guys who had served for quite a while in Alaska, and they knew all kinds of tricks that enabled us to set the battalion aid station up as the warmest tent in the field. Given that most of our training took place in sub-freezing temperatures, the aid station was the place to be. We often had officers from other companies just come hang out simply to get warm for a little bit. Needless to say, if you could get a position with the aid squad, you were set for field exercises, far less walking, far more warmth, and a far happier life. There was a fellow line medic in my unit who I'll call Slug, because that's a generic term we used in the army for someone who was a waste of space. I actually liked Slug when I first met him. He was friendly, easygoing, and he seemed to be an all-around nice guy. Over time, my respect for Slug waned more and more. He always seemed to be broke, and he was not shy about asking to borrow money. He gave his girlfriend my phone number because he didn't want to pay to maintain his own, and she would always call me to vent about him on the numerous occasions that she caught him cheating on her. If there was ever work to be done, he always found excuses to be elsewhere. To put things in perspective, avoiding work was a highly respected art form, known as shamming, in my unit, but there were caveats. Avoiding work at your buddy's expense was frowned upon, and clumsy excuses that put you or your buddies in a bad light were also considered to be in poor taste. For example, getting 4 guys together for vehicle maintenance at the motor pool, when in reality they were each simply going to get on a creeper, a board that rolls under vehicles, for a mid-morning nap, was a highly regarded form of shamming. Slug loved to sham, but he was terrible at it. More often than not, his attempts made the rest of us look bad, and they often brought more work on us to boot. For whatever reason, the stars aligned in Slug's favor, and he was given the opportunity to attend SUSV driving school for the purposes of driving an ambulance. An SUSV is an all-terrain vehicle that was invaluable to us in the snow. This golden opportunity was poised to deliver him from the harsh life of the frontline medic into the luxury life of the rear medic. It just so happened that the first day of driving school happened to fall during the daylight saving switchover. The change was such that anyone forgetting about it would have shown up to work an hour early. Slug thought that he would use this to his advantage, to sneak in an extra hour of sleep, seemingly unaware that the change had already brought him an extra hour of sleep. I had just come in from shoveling snow outside the aid station, around 15 minutes before his class was scheduled to start, when the following exchange took place between me and the aid station squad leader. "You seen Slug around today?" "No, Sergeant, I haven't." "And you call him? His driving class is scheduled to start very soon, and he's going to be late." "I'll do it right now, Sergeant." Realizing this was urgent, I quickly found his girlfriend's number and called him up. The following conversation then ensued. "Hey Slug, squad leader is asking where you are. Apparently you have a driving class that's about to start, and you're late for it." "Yeah, tell them I forgot about the time change, so I'm running an hour late." Knowing that if he had forgotten about the change, he would have been an hour early. "Are you sure that's what you want me to tell him?" "Do you think I'm BSing about this or something? Just tell him what I just told you." "Okay, see you in 15 minutes. So I hung up and made my way back to squad leader. "Sergeant, I just got off the phone with Slug, and he said he forgot about the time change and is running an hour late. He'll be heading in soon." "Do you have a driver's license?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Can I see it?" I showed him my license. "Great, take this packet, head on down to the motor pool, and tell them that there's been a last-minute change of plans. Slug is unable to make today's training session, so you'll be taking his place." And that's how I went from living the miserable life of a line medic to the relatively easy-going life of an ambulance driver and guy in charge of the battalion pharmacy. Whenever I'd see Slug in the field complaining about how cold and miserable the last few days had been, I would commiserate with him, expressing gratitude about how good I had it back at the aid station, with regular meals and near-constant warmth. "That should have been you," I'd tell him. "It's too bad you weren't able to make it to your training on that day." 4. I work in wholesale distribution of building materials. I don't sell to the public, I only sell to established accounts. This is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, most of my customers are great people. We get along very well, occasionally even meet up outside of work with some I've known for 15 plus years. There is a minority that can be annoying. Some only use me as a last resort, which is okay. I understand I'm not everyone's first call, but they treat me like dirt because they are usually frustrated they can't get said part from the preferred channels. Most of the time, they have tried 3 or 5 other sources, and if they don't have X item, chances are slim I'll have pallets of it lying around anyway. One such character that only uses me as a last resort is Mike. Mike is routinely in a bad mood because he's been told, "Sorry, we don't have that," at least a few times before calling me. He often gets irate when I don't have whatever uncommon part he needs ASAP, sitting on the shelf waiting for him. One day Mike calls, and this is how it goes. "Hello, Snake here, how can I help?" "Snake, I need to get 4 replacement pieces for this part. The fucking contractor ordered it in the wrong finish." The contractor ordered it in the standard finish, this guy needs it in an obscure finish, of course, and I need 4 of them yesterday. Please tell me you have them on the shelf. While I'm looking up the availability, he starts going on about how this is one of the most expensive projects he's worked on, and they have buckets of money, blah blah blah. At this point, I miraculously find the part in stock in my company, and I tell him, "It's probably a good thing they have buckets of money because this part is going to cost you, especially if you need 4 of them tomorrow. I do have these available, but they will have to be shipped from the other side of the country. Snake, I need these parts. Please just send them over the next day air delivery. I don't care." "Mike, at least let me get you a freight estimate. Shipping has gotten very expensive during the pandemic, and I don't like shipping something without you knowing a ballpark estimate."
"Snake, I told you I don't care what it costs. Get the parts on the way."
"Okay, Mike, I'll get them shipped today, sure. Let me let you go because it's 3 p.m. and I need to get on the phone with that warehouse so they can force the order to print right away." So I ordered the parts just as Mike asked. These parts were 4 pieces, ground shipping, would have ran 4 to 5 days and probably cost $25 each. Next day air, $386 each. They weigh a decent amount, which makes anything going by air cost multitudes more. Shipping ended up costing almost as much as the product. I didn't hear from Mike for a few days. The product arrived as requested. He finished the job and got the contractor out of hot water. He didn't have time to wait on his bill to arrive in the mail, so he called me for the freight cost.
"Snake, how much was the freight for all that stuff last week?"
Let me pull it up. It looks like it ran $1,544, plus the cost of the product, $2,230.
"You're fucking with me, right?"
"No, sir. Overnight air shipping from across the country is very expensive. I can show you the bill from UPS if you'd like."
"I told the contractor it would probably run $400. Jesus Christ, Snake. I could have waited a day or 2 if I knew it was that much."
Blah, blah, blah. I had to cut him off mid-rant. "Mike, I specifically asked you if you wanted an estimate. You declined. I don't know what else you could reasonably expect me to do." He pretty much mumbled some more choice words and got off the phone. Interestingly enough, he did start calling me a bit more after that, but he makes sure to note the pricing a bit more closely. 5. Years ago, I worked in a very small branch of a national chain of food stores. I'd just been transferred from the still small but slightly bigger store, which was a 2-minute walk away from my new workplace in the center of the small town I lived in. Yes, we had 2 branches of the same store in a village of fewer than 5,000 people. Would you believe we used to have 3 until the smallest one closed down entirely? Due to the close proximity of the 2 stores and the fact that we all shared an employer, the staff of both stores tended to all be familiar with each other. I had known the manager for a few years before my transfer took place, and we had always got along famously. For the first few months, everything went swimmingly as I co-managed a new bakery which had been built in the back during a recent refit. As the months wore on, however, the manager's true personality came out, and she started bullying first the colleague who had transferred with me to co-manage the bakery, then myself, once she realized my co-worker wouldn't show any sign of being affected by the bullying. Unfortunately, I was not so good at pretending to be unaffected, and so she fixated on me, making my life a living hell for the better part of a year. It got to the point where I was dreading having to ever see her, so I started looking for jobs, and as luck would have it, scored a salaried position, earning double what I currently was. As soon as I handed in my notice, my manager seemed to make it her life's mission to drive me to a nervous breakdown in the few weeks she had left to do so. At this point, I finally realized that she only had power if I allowed her to, so I stopped giving her the reaction she wanted whenever she tried to make unreasonable requests, criticize my work style, etc. Instead, if she said anything to try and antagonize me, I would just smile and say, "Okay," and go do whatever I was meant to do. As you can imagine, this got right under her skin to see she'd lost her power over me. After a couple of weeks of this, she came to the bakery one day to tell me there were multiple tasks I needed to do, the vast majority of which were pointless and not mandated by the company guidelines, i.e. sweep the patch of pavement in front of the delivery door, sort the boxes in the freezer alphabetically, etc. After each request, I would smile and say, "Okay." After she had finished assigning me my pointless tasks, she had one more request. In the most condescending tone possible. "Oh, and don't just stand there and say okay when I speak to you. It's really patronizing." I paused for a second, wanting to show that I wasn't bothered by her criticism. After a few moments, I smiled at her and went, "All right." She gave me the fakest smile ever and then turned and walked away, visibly shaking with rage that I hadn't given in to her tactics. I later found out in the days after I left, she badmouthed me to the rest of the staff in the store. To be fair, I knew full well she was doing this before I had even left, because the other staff would tell me, and even said to one, "I wonder how long it'll take before he comes and begs me for his job back." Another time, one of the staff members even told me she'd said she didn't understand why I hadn't kept in touch after leaving. Okay? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 108. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe and possibly leave a comment as well. It is the season for giving, so give me a comment. As it is December, of course, we all have to be nice to each other. No other month in the year do we have to be nice. It's just the holiday season. We must put our grumpiness aside and pretend we like people. Did I say that? No. I mean, let people know how much we care. I've cared for them all along. Yeah, that sort of thing. I think I have a birthday shout-out. That'll stop me talking. Right, let's see. It's the second today, isn't it? Yes, it is. Second. Birthdays. This one, nope. Not that one. That one's for tomorrow. One I did yesterday. Move that. There we go. This one goes to Sheila. And Sheila's birthday is today. They don't mention how old they are, but regardless of how old you are, I hope you're having a great day and you're doing whatever you want, because make sure you're being spoiled, and if not, then spoil yourself. That's what I say. And before I go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sheila. Happy birthday to you. Alright, and I think we're going to wrap things up there for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.